Hi, Yumi Steins here. Are you looking for the best women's wellness and relationships podcast? Well, I got you covered. From mental health to the mental load, dating to diet culture, if it's in your group chat, then we're talking about it. Search for Ladies We Need to Talk on the ABC Listen app.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
When Brad Guy turned 21, he was given a voucher to go skydiving. It took Brad almost a year to use it, but right before the voucher was due to expire, he booked a date for the jump. And to make a day of it, Brad invited his whole family and new boyfriend to come along and watch. But after Brad and his instructor jumped out of the plane together, things quickly went terribly wrong. Their parachute didn't open properly, and neither did the backup parachute. Brad survived his fall to earth, but the accident changed him and his family forever. And in some ways, their new life is better than the old. Brad's memoir, published a few years ago now, is called Free Fall. Hi, Brad.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How was life looking for you in your 21st year? What was going on?
It was really exciting. I was on the precipice of so many new developments in my life that I'd worked really hard for. I had just gotten a job in breakfast radio, and that was my big dream. I always wanted to work in that industry and had just come out and told everyone about who I truly am and found a new relationship, which was bringing me a lot of joy. And I was raised in the country and finally with the job, was going to move closer to the city and live my big city dreams. So really everything I wanted was starting to slowly fall into place at that time.
And what exactly was on offer with this voucher that you were given?
Yeah, it's just an adrenaline experience voucher. So you could choose things like hot air ballooning or rally car driving, bungee jumping. So I got to choose the experience, and I wanted to choose the most extreme one, which was skydiving. So that was my choice.
And was that because you were a bit of an adrenaline junkie already, or is that just what 21-year-old men do?
I think a bit of both, actually. I'm a thrill seeker for sure. Maybe less so now, but yeah, I like doing the most extreme of things. I had a very outdoorsy, rambunctious childhood. So yeah, that sort of choice was very typical for me at the time.
So who was with you on the day of the jump?
My entire family were there. So my mum, my dad, my 3 sisters and their husbands, and my niece and 3 nephews, and my boyfriend. So basically everyone that I was close with, but we did a lot of things together as a family. And even that was very normal. We just decided to make a day of it. And it was at a winery. So we had lunch together and we had a couple of drinks and it was beautiful and sunny.
What time of the day was your skydive scheduled for?
It was scheduled for the early afternoon. They were having some delays and I was the last one scheduled. So the pushbacks kept delaying the jump. They did ask me if I wanted to go into a different day because they were running so far behind. But I was really adamant on just getting through it and wanting to quell my nerves, and my whole family were there. So yeah, there was no chance that I was going to delay it myself.
And you were going to be jumping in tandem. So you were with an experienced instructor who, had done this a million times before.
Yeah, the instructor was one of the most experienced in Victoria and quite revered as well. And I remember them telling me that I'm lucky that I have him because he is so experienced and it was going to make the experience a lot better. So yeah, I felt very assured.
And then the time came for you to go and get in the plane. What was it like, the aeroplane?
The plane was scary. It was really small. It was a very tiny plane, and I laughed because I think I expected something big like a commercial plane, but this tiny metal rattly plane just meant that you could feel every single bump and grind. So since I was the last jump, it was just me and the instructor and the pilot, and it was a very cramped space with just a thin rubber mattress on the ground. So no seats, no armrests, it was very bare bones.
By the time you were in that plane and heading up and it's getting closer, what was that ratio between excitement and terror like?
I was getting less excited for sure. The plane itself and being able to feel so high up in a commercial airplane, you just wouldn't feel the height. But in this tiny plane with all the gear strapped to you, lots of turbulence, and even the door opening and feeling the ferocity of the winds, knowing that you can't really see what's happening behind you because you're strapped in front of someone. Yeah, it's terrifying.
What did the instructor say to you just before the jump, Brad?
He gave me a briefing on what to expect, just a bit of an overview of what we went through on the ground, just reminding me to keep my legs up when we're landing and how long the free fall is going to last, what the parachute thrust is going to feel like, and to make sure to smile at the GoPro that was strapped to his wrists. But yeah, the last thing he said to me was, any last words? And me having a bit of a dark sense of humor said, yep, hope my parachute opens.
And then there's the moment where you're at the edge of the plane and then suddenly you jump out. What do you remember of that initial free fall?
I remember being very hesitant to leap out the plane. I was holding on to the sides of the doors, just gripping with all my strength because I didn't want to jump out. The ferocity of the wind was just so powerful. Your legs are shaking. You can't hear anything. The wind is so loud. So he counts down and then pushes us both out. And it sounds really weird to explain, but it really does feel like you're falling. It's a free fall. You feel how heavy you are. Everything's just so loud. The wind is whistling, but it is very euphoric for that 7 or 8 seconds that you are free falling because you are just floating through the earth.
How did that euphoria, that sense of euphoria, change?
I just remember recalling the instructions and waiting for that thrust. There was meant to be a real velocity shift with the parachute opening, and that change in speed, a lot of people can get injured through that because with the harness and the velocity shift, it can be quite an impact. So I remember being told to brace for that and not really feeling that as we're falling. But I couldn't really notice anything going wrong until just all this shuffling happening behind me. My instructor was doing something up and above my head, but I couldn't turn around to see. So I was just feeling a lot of elbows going everywhere. I could feel his shoulder going into mine. And eventually I was able to catch a glimpse of him and what looked like fiddling with the parachute, doing something with the strings. And I can see that this first parachute isn't open. It's basically collapsed. So it's not able to catch wind. And from there, that's when I can start to feel really violent shaking. So our bodies are moving side to side. We're tumbling. It's like we're stuck in a washing machine. It's just mayhem, really. And through all that chaos, I am able to see again, and I can see 2 parachutes. They're 2 different colors. And again, my instructor is scrambling. He's trying to grab the strings. He's trying to open it. His elbows are going everywhere. We're shaking from side to side so much that I nearly come out of my harness. A shoe comes off. My instructor starts yelling at me to keep my feet up and keep my feet together because we very easily could have disconnected. And there is just panic is what I would feel like was coming from him.
And for you too, were you able to even think in those moments, or what was happening?
Weirdly enough, I did feel very cognizant, and it's very strange to reflect on because the moment would have happened so quickly, but I just remember losing hope and just being convinced that this was it. I could feel the earth getting closer and closer, and it stopped feeling like falling and started to feel more like the earth was just coming to hit us. And the disorientation, not being able to see right, feeling all this panic behind me, I just felt guilt. I knew that my family were watching this and viewing this, and even as I'm falling, I felt like I was putting something on them. I'm going to die, and they're all going to see. It's my fault, and I just need to accept that this is happening.
What do you remember of the moment of impact?
It was extremely confusing. It took me a while to actually accept what had happened, but I remember just hitting the ground, and we sort of rolled to an embankment of a lake on a golf course. But that initial impact, just the pain, I didn't know what had happened. The pain was so overwhelming, I couldn't even open my eyes. I was so winded, I couldn't catch my breath, so I'm gasping for air. I start hysterically sobbing. It feels like someone's ripped my spine out of my back, and since we're on the embankment of a lake and we're semi-submerged, I can't feel my legs, and I can't move my legs. I had believed that I wouldn't walk again, even in that split second. Couldn't move my legs. I'm a paraplegic. I was able to grab onto my instructor. So we had landed on top of each other, and with all the movement, we had landed perpendicular. So all my injuries were upper body, all his were lower body, but he was unconscious when we had landed. So with the little strength that I had, I'm trying to grab his hand and telling him to wake up and shaking him and saying, please wake up, asking him what had happened. It was just extremely confusing. And with him being unresponsive, I had also convinced myself that he had died and that I was lying on top of a dead person and it was my fault. All these thoughts whirling around my head at once that just broke me, really.
Were there people there to help straight away?
There were. So I couldn't really move much of my body, couldn't move my legs or my back or my neck. So all I could hear was people running towards us. And there happened to be some golfers that were golfing on the course at the time. So I hear a buggy, they come down, they're able to separate us. My instructor wakes up, thankfully. He's screaming in agonizing pain. So am I. I think they were just bewildered by what they were seeing, but they were able to separate us and get us out of the lake and call the ambulance. So it all started from there.
What about your family, who you'd been so conscious of even in those terrifying moments? How far away were you from where they were watching?
When I landed, I didn't know where I was, but where we landed on the golf course, it was maybe 1 to 2 kilometers away from the airport where we landed. And as I'm getting lifted into the back of the ambulance, the only thing I can hear, because I can't move my body, is my mum and my sister and my boyfriend at the time. And I could hear them crying. This is the only part that makes me upset. Just hearing them so upset and telling them that they love me and that I'm going to be okay. And they had run all that way through paddocks, jumping gates. And my mum is like, she's not an athlete. She was in her 60s at the time. And my entire family had no idea what was going on. They couldn't ask the people at the airport what had happened because they didn't know either. All they saw was me falling and crashing. So even they were all convinced that I had died. And they did everything they could just to run to my rescue and see if I was okay.
What state were you in the ambulance?
Completely broken. I couldn't move. So I was conscious and I knew what was going on in a way, but still at that time convinced that I would never walk again. It felt very real. I was cut out of all my clothes. I was injected with a bunch of painkillers and just had to stare at the ceiling of an ambulance while my boyfriend is there trying to see if I'm okay. So did not really have a clear answer for anything. Even then, didn't even know that I had a skydiving accident. Couldn't even think that far back.
Really? So you'd kind of forgotten how
had no idea what had happened. No.
And it's not that you hadn't been knocked out.
No. I just didn't make sense of it. I didn't know that's what had happened. It was all told to me after the fact. So when I got to the hospital, I'm doing all these scans, getting more injections, can't move. I'm like braced up with a back brace and neck brace, staring at the ceiling. And I'm just hearing them say parachute accident. I'm seeing them look at my file and say parachute accident. And that's when it starts to click in that something had happened with the skydive. And I just became inconsolable. None of it made sense. And even laying in hospital that very first night, my parents were able to see me before I went to bed. And they were distraught as well. And they're asking questions like, how did this happen? What's going on? I think people were pretty surprised. Even the medical staff couldn't really believe what was on the file.
Couldn't believe that you'd survived.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What was that first night in hospital like?
Yeah, that first night was probably the worst of my life. I wanted it to end. I just was on so many painkillers, but could still feel such excruciating pain in my spine. Still had very little movement in my legs. Wasn't able to move even if I wanted to. So I'm just staring at the ceiling. And every time I closed my eyes, I could just feel myself falling. And I'd get really heavy vertigo and very easily disoriented that I couldn't sleep even if I wanted to. So I remember calling the nurses constantly, telling them to give me more drugs. I wanted to be put out of my misery because I could still feel the pain, and the pain was everywhere. And what was so scary was, did I have a brain injury? Am I going to need a wheelchair? Will I ever move again? Will I live my life? Everything's over. No one's helping. I'm by myself. My family can't be here. Yeah, that first night was when everything started to sink in that this was pretty extreme.
What could doctors tell you the next day or following days about the extent of your injuries and what the kind of recovery process was going to be like?
It was very slow. I remember the first 3 days I wasn't able to sit up even, but I did every single scan you can think of, and they eventually told me what my physical diagnoses were. So I broke most of my upper spine, fractured my lower spine, and tore the ligaments in my neck. They didn't say for sure if I would walk fully. All I was told was there will be extensive rehabilitation for you once you get home from hospital. And I wasn't really looking forward to that. I didn't want to leave the hospital. In fact, I felt like it was a bit of a refuge, and starting the next phase of my life with all these injuries, not being able to move and feeling sorry for myself was not something I was looking forward to. But the other overwhelming thing was having a counsellor come and talk to me about what might happen to me mentally. I had never even considered mental health as something that I would need to look after or even think about. So to be told that I need to see a therapist while in hospital because this is a pretty bad case, yeah, it felt very, at the time, infantilizing and scary. I'd never done anything like, I'd never broken a bone before. So all of this happening at once, it just did not look good for me.
And you were only 21.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're still such a young guy.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay in hospital, given the extent of those physical injuries?
Only 4 days. Yeah, it was really brief. I think as soon as I was able to sit up, that's when they took me home. So I wasn't even able to fully walk when I left hospital. I had a neck brace and a back brace on. So I couldn't move any part of my body. I was immobilized. Couldn't even go to the bathroom myself. Couldn't really feed myself. I left the hospital in a wheelchair as well. So I'm getting wheeled out by my mum and dad, put into the car and heading back to the country to try and start this next chapter.
So was there any point or any part of you, Brad, in this early, this first phase that had the feeling of exhilaration that you'd survived, that you had almost died? Doctors thought, how do you survive falling from the sky with a parachute that doesn't open, and you've made it?
No, no. I felt unlucky. I felt burdened. I felt like I had done something to deserve it. My mind went to a very dark place as to why this happened to me, and I felt like I made a dumb choice. So this is the result of that. Never, ever, ever felt lucky until maybe 10, 11 years after. So I felt like I'd put something on myself, and I felt so guilty, not even as I was falling, but for months and years after, I felt so guilty because now I'm incapacitated and my family has to look after me and I can't do anything for myself. I'm having night terrors every night, throwing things around the house, and mum has to console me. I don't want to see anyone. I can't shower. I can't poo. I couldn't do anything for myself. So I would get really frustrated when people would tell me that I was lucky, especially in that period, but even after the fact, because there was nothing lucky about that situation at all. It was a burden.
Once you were back at home being looked after mainly by your mum, that terrible nightmare, those nightmares that you had in that very first night in the hospital, were they still around?
Yes. It's still a part of my life, really. That's just my cross to bear, I accept. But I remember seeing a psychiatrist right before I got the neck brace and back brace off after months of suffering, and he was able to actually put names onto these things I was experiencing, which was PTSD, nightmare disorder, which is a type of night terrors, and depression. Of course, it made sense at the time, but I remember even getting those diagnoses and just feeling like it's actually over. Like, I'm a freak. I can't believe now I've got all these things to deal with, and I've got a broken back and I've got a broken mind. But it was still very real. I was getting triggered at that time. I couldn't even hear the word skydive without having a panic attack. Such regular night terrors that it was almost nightly, where mum would have to come into my room and physically console me because I'm screaming and ripping posters and throwing cushions, yelling at my niece and nephew because I don't want to see them. Could not accept any joy into my life at that time.
Were you dreaming about the accident, about the skydive? Is that what kept coming up?
Yes. Initially, I was dreaming about the accident, and then slowly the dreams turned into any sort of near-death scenario or death scenario involving me and my family. And night terrors, compared to dreams, are very physical and they're in your body. So these visceral reactions of seeing your family drown or getting steamrolled or like falling into cement, or like how mob bosses would concrete your feet and throw you off a bridge. Like I would have these really real visions that involve a lot of different elements of my trauma, mainly falling and being stuck and my family being there. And it's just horrifying. And the nightmare disorder eventually led into having many, many sleep issues throughout the years. And it's just in my body. These three things are just imbued with who I am that I have to live with now, 12 years later. But the nexus of it all was that 4-month period, which was the hardest to deal with.
What about that moment in your recovery where the braces came off and you were able to walk? How was that? Did that feel like a turning point?
It was. It was more motivating. I remember the hospital visit where they finally took them off me and how stinky the braces were. I just wanted to get these things off me. It was very liberating, and being able to drive home and slightly turn my body and look out the window, I was so, so thankful. And that's the other thing that makes me emotional is like, I took for granted such normal things in my life, like being able to turn my head, being able to get in and out of a car, being able to drive, go upstairs. Oh, I really took them for granted as a 21-year-old, but I was so, so determined then, because the first physio session I had, the physio was really optimistic. He was an amazing person, such a good clinician, spoke to me on a real human level and was very emotional. And that felt very humanizing. And we did all these crazy activities. He'd get a plate and pretend it would be a steering wheel and teach me how to do a head check or like how to get in and out of my car. And we'd have the parallel bars, and because walking was still very difficult for me because I had 4 months of not using certain muscles and they had started to atrophy a little. So the walking was a big one where I would walk 5 to 10 steps and then next session get a little bit further. Then he gave me the confidence to walk to the end of my driveway, and he's like, when you get to the end, the next day you go a little bit further. So after that 4-month dark period, I just had to bring it all back to the one thing, which is I'm going to walk a little bit further every single day. So I'd get to the end of my street, and then I'd get to the end of the the bus where the bus would stop, and then I'd get to my sister's house, and my niece and nephew, when they were babies, would wave at me from the window. It was all very much a slow, long build to eventually be a bit more able-bodied. Yeah.
You said, Brad, how just before the accident happened, you were about to make this big, exciting change to Melbourne and take on this dream job in radio. What was happening work-wise with this accident? Where was that part of your life and future?
I remember one of the things that really held me together after nearly losing the will to live during that dark stage. I just assumed that I could get my job back and start fresh. Getting back into radio after 4 months was a dream that kept me going. And I went back to the office to have a conversation about what me re-entering the workforce might look like. And I was made redundant from that job. And I thought we were going to have a conversation about having a special kind of chair, an orthopedic chair, and being able to use the lift instead of the stairs. I was so, so hopeful. But yeah, there had been some movements in the company and that job no longer existed. So I did not have a job to get back to. And even that was a massive blow for my recovery, because now, even though I'm so excited to walk again, it's all I've got. I don't have a job keeping me company. I've got nothing to work towards. So I felt really hopeless.
What opportunity did come your way then in radio?
So after a year from the accident, even though I didn't really feel mentally prepared, I had an old radio co-host that I worked with in community radio get a job for Triple M in Gippsland. And after a month of her having the job, she said, oh, the male co-host is leaving and there might be a spot for you. We've got established chemistry. We've got the demos. And I thought, oh my God, this is my ticket. Even though the idea of moving away from my support network, I'd started therapy then. I had a relationship based in Melbourne. I was starting to feel better, but I don't think I was fully prepared because even working full stop, I hadn't done for a year. And that was a high pressure, high stress job. But there was no way I could say no because I was that type of teenager and uni student that had the full spreadsheet, every single content director in the country, what their feedback was, sending demos all the time. It was my dream and there's no way that I could say no. And in fact, saying yes, for me, I thought would help me recover.
And how did that play out?
It was really exciting. It was really, really exciting. It was such a high pressure, high stress job. Needlessly, I didn't think it needed to be so high stress, and the environment was not conducive to my recovery at all. I wasn't close to my physio. I wasn't close to my therapist. I wasn't close to my boyfriend or my family. And I'm by myself in this country town as an openly gay man on Triple M in Gippsland. So it came with all these challenges that I just wasn't mentally equipped to handle, but I wanted to put off my recovery and put off therapy because I thought it would make me normal. And I just wanted to put it behind me and forget it even happened. But it was still in my body. And it just led to decisions that I don't think were best for me, really.
You'd got this coveted radio job in Gippsland, but things were not good between you and your boyfriend, whose dad was terminally ill. What were things like in the lead up to Christmas that year?
I was really building up to a moment that needed to happen with an abusive relationship where there's death involved. Our relationship was a secret because they were Greek Orthodox and his son was gay, but the family didn't really know. And going to his dad's funeral and not being able to partake, missing my family and not being as close with them, having panic attacks at work, high stress environment, going out on the weekends, getting cooked off my face, not sleeping, driving all the way back to Warragul and Melbourne, hosting a breakfast radio show at 6 a.m.
I'm going to start crying just hearing the description. It's too much, even just the way you're describing it is overwhelming.
I was living a very chaotic life, self-medicating, especially doing little things like me and my ex fighting, but then going out and partying, driving home on a Sunday, not sleeping, and then waking up at 4:30 a.m. and hosting Triple M. My God, like I just could not escape all this stress and all this pressure. It was so overwhelming. And it eventually led to a massive mental breakdown. I remember Christmas in my final year of radio being so highly strung that I could have snapped at any moment. And I did. I remember my ex and I would have little squabbles and my mum heard us once and my mum said, well, you should be nicer to him. You shouldn't say things like that. And I blew up because she didn't know a lot of what was happening. And I had a full-blown, borderline catatonic mental breakdown. I just stormed off, ran into my sister's closet and was ripping things. I was screaming. I smashed a glass. I was inconsolable and I did not have control over my body. It's really scary to look back and this mental snap. And there's so many parts of it that I don't even remember because my family had to tell me after the fact, which of course is very shameful and guilty for me. But my mum and my three sisters came into the room and they all sat down next to me and just held me and had to stop me from hurting myself and yelling. They had to really restrain me because I was just uncontrollable. And in a way, it was the moment that needed to happen because I had just put off so much of my recovery in this high-pressure job and this abusive relationship. I was traumatized, but I did not have a proper outlet for all my feelings. So it led to this huge breakdown. But at the time, I did everything I thought you were meant to do. I had a job and I had a boyfriend and everything was like okay on the surface. But deep down, there were some big fundamental things that were in deep need of healing.
So what big changes did you make after that?
I made some really big changes. I made the really hard decision to leave radio, and I never in a million years thought I'd quit a job that's so hard to get, but I knew it wasn't good for me and it wasn't a good environment for me to flourish. So I quit that job and I broke up with my boyfriend. I also moved inner city to Melbourne, where I always wanted to live. I moved to South Yarra and I love that area. I love the Art Deco buildings. I love the Yarra River. I just really was very defiant on what I wanted at that time. And after a few weeks, I was really lucky to get a new job in breakfast radio, working at Fox FM, the main station in Melbourne, and got a job for their breakfast show, very similar to the job I had when I had the accident. So it was luck, it was manifestation, it was hard work, it was selling myself. But at the start of 2016, I just wanted to focus on me and be very selfish, which was also very hard to do, especially knowing the family I come from. But I got a brand new therapist. I had a brand new job. I was single in a new place, closer to all my resources. And that was probably the real start of my actual recovery, was 3 years after the accident.
What kind of approach did your therapist take to the accident and the aftermath?
Surprisingly, she was really practical and pragmatic. A lot of the strategies I picked up were very hands-on and very tangible. We'd do things like, I would say skydive and she'd record it, and then she would play my own voice saying that word over and over. We did a lot of exposure therapy. We did a lot of CBT. And she was just very thorough and very stern and emotionless, very like a Judge Judy type. That's what she reminded me of. And I think I needed that. The reason why that therapy worked is because I wasn't being coddled and I didn't feel like a victim. And it was very empowering to just see it as point A to point B. So that was a huge turning point with that particular type of therapy.
I guess feeling like you're kind of more in charge of yourself, not swept up in this terrible experience of being a victim, as you put it, but having a bit more agency around your life, lets you think in maybe a bit of a different way about your own family, your own childhood, and like what things were like in the world you grew up in, even way before this accident. So tell me a little bit about that, Brad. Like, what had things been like for your mum and dad when they were growing up?
Yeah, this is something that I've only recently started to reflect on. Now that I feel like I've done all the hard work with my trauma, I can actually look back and see how my upbringing and how my life before the accident impacted how it influenced me. So I come from a very working class background, and it's something that I'm really proud of. My parents didn't even finish high school. They grew up pretty poor, you could say. My mum left school at 13 to work at a shoe factory with her mum, and my dad left school at 15 to be a labourer. Their siblings had to do the same thing, just as soon as you can, go to work, make money. So they really instilled in us from a very young age a very positive work ethic. But I think them coming from very little meant that even though we had very little as kids, we were programmed to think that we were abundant. And Mum and Dad just wanted us to be good kids, very well behaved. We were never really allowed to complain or get bored. It was always, you know, your father built this house himself and you've got 6 acres to play on, go play with the goat. So we never could really have any sort of negative emotion. And I think that has its plus and minuses. But I'm very grateful that they instilled this sense of abundance in us and really wanted us to be good people first and foremost. This forced gratitude, you could say, really put a lovely rose tint over my upbringing. It was hard growing up in country Victoria in a town of 200 people with 40 kids in my primary school. There weren't many industries there at the time. We experienced droughts, very much that more macho, stoic sort of culture, not a lot of mental health, no other gay people. So growing up as heavily overweight, gay, ADHD, emo kid in rural Australia, there were a lot of...
there's a lot going on in that statement,
there's a lot going on.
Brad.
Yeah, too much.
So when it came time to go to high school, did you find your group to fit in with? What was it like for you?
I was a bit of a chameleon in high school. So it was just me and one other kid from Pylong, where I grew up, that went to the school that I went to. And it was one of the better schools in the area and one of the more affordable private schools. And I remember just being really overwhelmed by the scale of it. There were 40 kids in my primary school, 6 grade sixes. I was school captain. So I was going from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. And I was not like the other boys. Like, this was a real macho-y, bravado sort of school, had an amazing football program. Kids go there to play AFL or to play cricket. And I was just not that type of kid. So I didn't really fit in at all, but I forced myself to. I forced myself to like things I didn't like or to say things that I didn't want to say. I concealed so much of myself, and there were so many rules. Get a manual license because that's not gay. Don't look at your fingernails this way because that is gay. Or don't go to the boarding house because then you're gay. Like, there were just so many weird social rules around high school, and I really dulled myself down, and I was very, very quiet and very, very shy. Would only really come alive in certain moments. I always wanted to do things like theatre and dancing, but every time I did, I would just get horrendously bullied. I could never really flourish the way I wanted to. So the friendship group that I found myself in was amazing for my survival as a big group of footy and cricket boys, but they were the ones that bullied me the most. And a lot of the toxicity from that school, I think, was filtered down through them. And my friends were the ones that bullied the other gay kids. And I just sat there and said nothing. So my survival in high school took a lot of sacrifice.
It's that thing they say about high school, about being around kids who are powerful rather than kids you actually like. You know, that's a trap for lots of us.
Yes.
Were you aware yourself in high school, Brad, that you were attracted to guys? Was that even something that you could give voice to, even privately?
I wish I just knew myself deeper, or let myself know myself deeper. Even when I was really young, before high school, I had all these thoughts and feelings come up, but I just knew it was wrong. And I got to high school and I saw how much the boys loved hanging out with girls and how that was very revered and made you popular. So I really tried to copycat that just to give myself some social capital. I just denied how I felt, even though they were so obviously there. But it wasn't just denying the feelings inside, but denying some of these character traits that I really hold true to this day. Like, I love being flamboyant, I love being extroverted, I love dressing up, but I really had to silence myself. So throughout high school, you couldn't even waterboard it out of me. There was no way that I even believed it, because I just got into such deep denial. It would never come out.
So how did that change?
It was after high school, really. I was in my last year of uni and I did a student exchange, and I went to Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And being an Australian at an American college, you're just exotic and people love you and they want to chat to you. So I remember picking up all these girls and taking them home, and nothing would happen. And I'd think maybe I was too drunk, or maybe I just didn't like them. I always had an excuse, but I started backpacking and really traveling after my student exchange and really got this sense of wanderlust. And I was traveling through Beijing with a friend from college. He was American, and I just felt at the tip of my tongue that I had to share the secret. It was the first real proper best friend that I had that I feel like I could trust with this thing. And I downplayed it so much, even saying something like, I think there might be a slight, tiny little bit of a chance that there could be a morsel of attraction to guys. And I thought he was going to hate me, and I thought he was going to slam the door and call me a freak and just abandon me. But he was so chill. He was just like, dude, go out there, experiment. It's fine. So his nonchalance about it really gave me confidence to get back to Melbourne in my last year of uni and do exactly as he said, just start exploring my feelings. So it just took one person to really see me for who I truly was and to accept this huge burden. Like, it was the biggest secret of my life, caused me so much self-loathing, hated myself. It just took one person. And that was kind of the start of me being able to truly accept who I am.
So there's you coming to terms with this, living this, and then there's the other step of telling your family, I guess. How did you feel about the prospect of that, particularly telling your mum and dad?
It was terrifying. It was really scary. We just really love each other. We're very close as a family. We want to do right by each other. One of our catchphrases is, I feel bad. We carry a lot of shame and guilt. We feel bad if we didn't do the right thing or didn't leave the door open for someone. We feel bad, felt bad we didn't say please and thank you. So we just wanted to be good kids. And because I was still processing being gay, I still felt like there was something wrong with me. Even when I was leading up to the come out, I was very lucky that I've got 3 sisters, and my closest sister, Jess, was kind of my confidant throughout that process because I sort of told her early on, and she kind of came in the closet with me, and now we have this bonded experience forever where she would help me keep it a secret from mum and dad. I would stay at her house and go off in the middle of the night and meet strange men, and she'd be waiting in her dressing gown with a cup of tea, trying to get the goss as soon as I would get home. So I was very lucky that I had that confidant that would help me with the process. So I knew I didn't have to do it alone, but she was very concerned. She was more worried about dad when really it was mum that had a bit more of a reaction. Dad just told me he loved me for the first time.
For the first time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And first time I'd seen him cry as well. And mum was very accepting, but she was just very reticent about it and had a lot of traditional ideas of what a gay lifestyle is and what that involves. I just needed that time with mum, just me and her, to really accept this new identity, because I think she was really shocked and felt like she didn't know who I was and was looking for reasons. Like, was it this friend that did that? Was it because you went to America? Like, did I do this? What did I do wrong? Like, she really took it personally. So it took a few months for us to really get into a place where this is just natural. It's a part of life. She really got into the biology of it and that you're born this way. And she's not a very scientific woman, but I've got a gay cousin and she's worked with other gay people at this little country town bakery she used to work at. So she'd reference these people and think, oh, well, if you've got a gay cousin and then if this person's gay and they have a gay brother, oh, like, yeah, it must just happen genetically. So she turned to science, old Julie, which is amazing. So where we're at now, after that initial transition period, mum and dad love it now. Like, mum is my biggest supporter, my biggest fan. They've come to pride events with me. Mum's gone gay clubbing with me. And she's in her 70s. So, yeah, I've taken her to gay bars. I've introduced her to friends. She's seen things that a woman of her age probably shouldn't see. But I feel really, really blessed that even though there was that struggle, not just me personally, but struggle coming out to my sisters and my parents, where it's at now is a blessing for sure.
It's interesting listening to you, Brad, because, you know, of course, parents think about how they bring their children up, how they guide them. But of course, the reverse happens too. Kids guide their parents. Kids bring their parents up and change their parents. So even before the accident, it sounds like you coming out to your mum and dad and being honest about that part of yourself was changing the relationship with them. And then you have this huge traumatic accident. How did that change the way you were with your mum and dad and your sisters? Were there different kinds of conversations happening again, you know, on the next level after you had gone through that accident and were in that long process of recovery?
Well, coming out was only 8 months before the accident. So things were just happening so quickly at that time in my life. Like, it really crescendoed into all this change and all this movement. But I remember the conversation starting to be more around mental health, even in a very rudimentary sort of way. Even talking to my mum about how she dealt with my recovery, she would say things like, oh, I would just go sit in the car and cry because I didn't want anyone to see me upset. And those things just really break my heart. I would want us to show emotion to each other. And thankfully now these days, me and my sisters and my parents, we're so much more open. We're so much more able to be vulnerable. We can process things really quickly. Not that we fight a lot, but if there is a fight, for example, it's resolved within the hour. We just have such deep love for each other and we know how precious our life is. We've gone through a lot of loss and we didn't come from a lot, so we really cherish each other. I think now that's just on an even higher pedestal than it was before. And because I was in a position where I couldn't really hide my trauma, it was very much on display for everyone. I think now we're able to recognize when we see each other suffering, when things aren't really going well. We can check in a bit deeper and we can carry each other's load a bit better, where before maybe we would have been a bit more stoic and said, oh, she'll be right, like, I'll just fix it myself. Now I want to know what's going on with my sisters, and it's a part of life. Like, suffering is just something that we all have to endure, but our closeness, I think, is just a testament to how we were raised, and ultimately it's what saved my life.
Tell me more about the journey your mum's gone on over recent years in terms of looking at her own past.
Well, to paint a picture, mum is the definition of tuck shop lady. just a country broad Sheila type, has always worked like cash in hand jobs at cafeterias or nannying. Just a lovely, simple, beautiful woman it's everyone's mum. Julie is everyone's mum. And starting off, she wasn't very open about mental health or wouldn't really talk about her childhood or how she was raised. It was all very hush-hush, which is why as kids we couldn't really talk deep or show negative emotions. So mum had way more of a crazy upbringing than I had ever imagined, because she recently was able to dive deeper into her ancestry, something that she had suspicions on with her brothers growing up, but there was never any confirmation of where her grandfather came from. And a few years ago, we found out that my grandfather was Aboriginal and he was Tongarong, which is central Victoria. And it's special. It even gives me goosebumps now because we were raised on that land. Mum just found this paddock in Pylong where they had barely any money to stitch together and said, this has to be it. And raised her family there, just felt magnetized to this area. And our family have been years and decades since. But hearing about her upbringing and how that was influenced by my nan, who was a mixed race person, makes so much sense. For my mum to talk about generational trauma in her 70s is such an inspiration. So my nan, being a mixed race person, had half siblings, but was obviously visibly different. And her mum were what they call vagrants in that time. This is the 1920s, where they would go to different communities, go to different houses, eat out of bins. They were squatters. Just had a very rough, traumatic upbringing that almost didn't happen. And she unfortunately didn't know her father. So she never would have been raised in the culture or in the language. It was a shameful thing. Her mum buried birth certificates and photographs and lied about a bunch of things. And my nan believed a lot of these lies. That's why we never knew what was going on with this part of our ancestry. And for my mum and her brother to dive deeper into this part of their history is really admirable, because they had to confront a lot of scary realizations. But my mum is now really embracing of her ancestry and really open to it. She's gone to truth-telling sessions. She's joined the Water and Land Council and has really healed a part of herself, I think. Not that she really has a language for it yet, but I love that this is part of who we are. It's something I'm really proud of that I acknowledge internally, especially growing up in Central Vic and always knowing deep down that this landscape was really special to me. But now I know that there is a reason why I was meant to be there. And even our family have really supported our mum in this journey. And it has been hard for her, but I think she feels more complete. And since her life makes more sense, it's made my life make more sense. So her journey has healed me and my sisters as well.
When you came to write your book about the accident about 10 years after it happened, what role did your mum play in that?
My whole family played a role. Mum in particular was interviewed by my publisher.
Why not by you?
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. We still cry. Me and my sisters and my mum are very emotional people, and it was just too hard for me to even look my mum in the eye and talk about my accident, because she would just cry buckets and then I would cry. So in the book, there are excerpts from my mum that describes what that time was like, including her having to sit in the car and cry, and also her talking about when she was raised, what people would say to her with her trauma is just have a lemonade and toughen up. And that is something that she had adopted and taken with her all these years. So my accident kind of broke the glass ceiling for me and my family. Like, this is actual trauma that we're seeing in front of our eyes that you can't be hush-hush about because it's on my body. So being able to include that in my book, it was healing, it was confronting, but my family would do anything for me, and I love that they're part of this legacy now, and they'll be part of it forever.
You also went and spoke with the instructor who you dived with.
Yes.
That day. How did you feel about the prospect of seeing him again, Brad?
I was terrified. I was really scared. I was just so anxious, thinking that my experience would be minimized or reduced, or maybe he would think I had overreacted. I was just very scared of being invalidated. And that is very real, a very real feeling for me. I felt like growing up, perhaps my feelings weren't validated all that often because we should just be happy and we're happy life. So I've always found it really hard to own how I feel. And I had to reassure myself meeting the instructor that it doesn't matter what he says or does. I know what happened. I know how traumatic that event was. For me, it was the worst day.
Well, what did you learn when you spoke to him?
After 10 years of not being in contact, I didn't want to go in there with too much of an agenda. I just wanted to let it happen naturally. Of course, I had so many questions, but thankfully he was really cooperative in sharing his version of events and what had happened to him and how horrific his injuries were, but also what he was doing when we were falling. He was able to maneuver us into a position that he felt would save our lives. He didn't have a lot of control over the parachute. 2 parachutes that aren't opening, that are tangled with each other, does cause that sort of violent shaking. But with all the strength that he had, he was able to save our lives. And that is a fact I didn't know for 10 years. And it's really overwhelming just to know that he's out there somewhere having saved my life and that we're intrinsically linked forever. But my life is over here, his life is over there. But for him to meet me halfway and to want to share all these details, when he had just gone back to work, he'd gone back to skydiving eventually.
He'd gone back to skydiving?
Yep. He was very brazen about it, actually, because he also told me all these other horrifying stories of people that hadn't survived things like that. So I think he considered himself lucky. I was a little triggered by the fact that it so easily could have gone wrong. He's very blunt about that. So I am just obviously grateful, but it's hard to even thank someone for saving your life. Like, it's an impossible task, but I really do owe him everything. Yeah.
What's life look like for you now?
I feel really good. I feel amazing. Publishing the book changed my entire life. I don't know why, but I think the universe was trying to force me into a new chapter. I just had to reconnect with a part of myself and a part of my ancestry. So I just went walkabout. I got a fully remote job. I sold a bunch of stuff, packed everything in my car. And for the past year, I've just been traveling around Australia. And it's been the most incredible adventure. I feel so blessed that I get to live this amazing life. Every single achievement I've had since the accident still brings me to tears because I just feel so lucky that I get to do what I'm doing. To actually be happy again is such a gift. Everything is a gift from here on out. So I'm just happy. That's it.
Brad, I'm very happy that you're happy. Thank you for sharing your story on Conversations.
Thank you.
This conversation with Brad Guy was produced by Jen Leake and recorded on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples. Our executive producer is Nicola Harrison. I'm Sarah Kanowski. Thanks for listening.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.